not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to the show. You know, I fell right back into the saddle last time. I was cranking them out. And once again, the universe descended upon me. But the interesting thing is, it's also one of those things that brings up an interesting lesson that I think we can all stand to learn in the wide, wonderful world of real estate. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. My Thanksgiving was eventful, but not in the great way. So for those of you who are brand spanking new to the show, welcome. I'm super happy to have you here. Hopefully we're going to spend some time together and learn a lot of great things about real estate, maybe get you thinking about some things. You know, at the end of the year, I frequently find myself reflecting on the year, trying to see what I learned from both, you know, mistakes, victories, and failures, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a failure if you learn something from it, right? This has been a particularly difficult year in terms of just the universe randomly deciding to punch me in the face. And the most recent example of that was the property I live in, which for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know the history. For those of you who haven't been around, you're brand spanking new. There's a lot of equity in the home I'm currently in. If I'm the detached advisor to someone like me who owns this house, my suggestion is to sell it, buy something else, and something smaller, and use that equity to invest in properties in better markets, right? And this is something I've been talking about now for years. It's a little embarrassing, you know. It's like the maid who keeps a dirty house, right? They keep everybody else's house clean, but they somehow can't manage to do their own job in their own life. If there's an example of that in my life, it's this house, and I've let emotional things sort of dictate that, which I shouldn't have, right? But you know what? That is so much of what happens in real estate. People make decisions based on things that don't really have a whole lot to do with rational data or anything else. And I guess I am no different, at least in some things. So to kind of bring you up to date, in fact, I think I mentioned this in a previous show. All of my electronics basically committed suicide a month or so ago. So I had to buy an all new system. It wasn't even just a hard drive crash. This was the logic board just decided it was time to die. So had to end up buying a whole new computer system. In doing all of that, got the auto update in terms of software. So suddenly some software I was using to make the show no longer ran on the new OS. That was all fine and fun. Cost a good chunk of money to get all that rectified. Then Thanksgiving week, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, the plumbing at my house stops working. Meaning you can't let any water, can't let any fluids go down anything. You can't let it go down the shower, the sinks. You can't run the dishwasher. You can't do the laundry. You can't flush the toilets. You can't brush your teeth. You can't shower. You can't do anything. So that was fun. And absolutely. And it's another one of those things where, you know, some good came from it. So the downside is, it cost many thousands of dollars to ultimately solve the problem, but I dodged it costing nearly double that. So I'm gonna pass on some life lessons from my Thanksgiving experience. So this is the story of how the Rebel Broker lived in his house without plumbing for 2 weeks, because that's how long it finally took to rectify the situation. And the other thing is, and man, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of you know it. Those of you who have hired contractors, who have hired plumbers, who have done rehabs, flips, whatever, you know that the world of hiring people to do work on your house is potentially rough waters. There are a lot of folks out there who are either incompetent at what they do or are really out just to maximize profit for themselves. So in my situation, the problem was compounded because my go-to guys on issues relating to this part of my house were totally unbookable for 2 weeks. And that amount of time just happens to coincide with how long it took me to rectify it. It didn't end up being them doing the work. But the good news is now I have someone that I have considered to be an entirely reliable plumbing guy that I can hook up with aside from my first go-to guys. Now, my first go-to guys were the guys who I was told by the previous owner of this home, if anything happens with your septic lift station, which is what I have in my house is downhill from the sewer. So I have a holding tank that holds X amount of really ugly water that comes out of my house. And then when it gets to a certain level, it turns on a pump, and the pump pumps it up the hill. The head on it is about 50 feet. So that's got to be a big pump. The distance is more like 120 feet, but the amount of elevation is only about 50 feet. Anyway, for those of you out there who are plumbers, you know what I'm talking about, the head rating of the pump, right? So I call my usual folks, and they tell me, "Wait, hey, we're sorry, we can't get out there for 2 weeks. Let's see if we can. We'll see if we can squeeze you in as a quickie between going to the job we're working on or not." So a couple of days pass, no luck, no joy, and I'm frustrated. So I start calling around different places, and I ask people who won't do the work, because this is a specific area of plumbing where only a subset of plumbers will agree to do it. Some of them agreeing to do it without fully grokking what I'm telling them, even though I am very, very detailed in telling them exactly what they'll be facing when they get here. But I finally get a recommendation from a local plumbing group that I've used for years in other stuff. They're more the mainstream plumber guys, right? If I have a leak, I call these guys. The other place I call that couldn't help me out is the septic. They're the septic guys, right? They've got the big truck that can pump the poop and take care of pumps and pull things out of the ground. The other plumbers are I got a leak, or my shower's not working, that kind of stuff. And they suggest a guy who's in the next town down. And I had heard from other people, I'm in the real estate business, so I know that people had hired this guy before to do work on properties that were in escrow and needed plumbing work. So he agrees to come out, but he says he'll have to charge his emergency rate. So this is Wednesday. So this is the day before Thanksgiving. And he charges me an extra $100 per hour. And he's out there for 2 hours. So it ends up being something in the neighborhood of $500 for the visit, which I'm still kicking myself that I let that happen. But anyway, so he comes out here, he takes a look at it and decides that the problem, after doing some testing on the pump, decides that the problem is a blocked pipe. I have a very hard time believing that. I have a very hard time believing that a 3-inch pipe with 55 feet of head on it could get clogged like that on a home that's being constantly used all the time, right? I mean, I could see if a house sat there for a year or two and the solids got a chance maybe to accumulate at one end, but I've got a 2 horsepower pump on the bottom, right? So it just didn't ring true to me. And he said, "Oh, and we need to fix all this other stuff." And he wanted to replace the backflow valve and all this piping, and he wanted to get a clean out further up to the top. My alarm bells were going off. He sends me a bid for the work, $5,600, which doesn't include a pump. That's just replacing some pipe and putting in a clean out. And every bell in my head goes off, and I realize, no, this does not make any sense. So no, we're not going to do this. Call around to some other folks, find another place that's septic focused, a company I'd never heard of before. No one I've dealt with here in Morgan Hill has heard of them before, but they've got amazing reviews and a large quantity of them on Yelp and the other online stuff. So I go ahead and I give them a call and have them come out, and they have a magic camera thing. And by now we're a week in, right? Because I'm still struggling. This guy comes out the next day after I called him. We're still in that super busy season. Doesn't charge me some crazy bloated rate. And sticks his magical camera from the bottom all the way up to the top and finds there's no blockage. So it's the motor. So if I had gone with this other guy's bloated bid, if I was a average person who assumed that they were dealing with a plumber who really was trying to take care of them, not only would I have spent $5,600 to get that work done, I also, when it was finished, would have been faced with the problem that my waste still didn't work, right? The pump was the problem, not the pipe. So talk about keeping your thinking cap on when you're dealing with services. And I realize I'm giving you a specific of a goofy thing relating to my property, but you should apply this to everything, stuff that just doesn't make sense. And I'm gonna continue on with this because all through this process, I decided I am going to own every freaking step of this. I'm not going to delegate authority to the person I'm hiring. I am in charge. And I know a lot of you out there who are people who work in different trades, perhaps, are thinking, you are the nightmare customer, RebelBroker. You're the guy who's going to stand over my shoulder and tell me how to do what I've been doing for 20 years. And sadly, I won't, if at some point in the interaction, I get the feeling you really do know what the hell you're doing. And you're explaining stuff to me in a way that makes it super clear. And I'll feel like I can step away, right? So let's go ahead. We flash forward. We now have figured out that it is not the pipe, it's the pump. So, and I like the way this worked out because there was complete transparency. And this was as much from these guys I worked with as my own desire. But I found the pump and purchased it. Put it on will call for the plumber guy to come and fix it. And I'll tell you who the plumber guy is. I think he deserves a shout out on the show. So if you're in the Bay Area, his offices are in San Jose, but he'll service all the way down to Gilroy, all the way up past San Francisco, all the way over to Santa Cruz. And I think he deserves the business because he was a straight shooter. Any event, so he goes and he picks it up, comes out, does the work. So he does the work. He replaces all the things that the original plumber that came up from Gilroy suggested in his bid. All right. So all the same work. Plus he installed a clean out at the top just because he says for future sanity, you're going to want to have a clean out up there that you can easily access. Because remember, he had to access the pipe from the dirty end, meaning the end that is at the bottom of the hill. So as soon as he got rid of the backflow valve, all the fluid that was in that pipe had to come back down into the pit, right? So that's not pleasant. Now, luckily, it didn't completely overfill everything. It actually stayed in the pit. But that's how he was able to get the camera thing up in there. So now that doesn't have to happen. Now you can leave that valve off at the bottom and the backflow valve and go up at the top, and you can get access to it with your camera that way. All right. I realize that's a little bit detail-oriented for what I'm trying to sell here, or what I'm trying to advise you of. But have these folks walk you through the reason why they are doing different things, right? When I did that with the other plumber on his bid, just the stuff he was suggesting just did not make sense. Anyway, and not just because I didn't understand, but because he also could not explain it. So maybe that's asking a lot. Maybe some plumbers aren't great at explaining stuff. But remember, plumbing is pipes that move fluids, that relies on gravity. And there are places where it stops, and there are places where it goes. And I don't mean to oversimplify. I get there's code. I get there's math on how the volume of water that fills a 3-inch pipe with a 55-foot header, et cetera. I get all that. But you as the consumer, because I'll tell you what, this whole situation could have cost me tens of thousands of dollars if I had just let the other guy do what he said we needed to do. And it didn't cost me that, right? Okay, so he comes out, he does his thing, and I'm obviously not going to sit around while they're digging. I'm not going to sit around while they're cutting a pipe. I don't have any expertise to offer there. However, I was absolutely right there when they were installing the pump and hooking up the float switch that makes the pump come on. Why? Because prior to them ever showing up, I had downloaded the PDF of the installation guide for that pump, and I knew exactly what was supposed to happen. And thank God I did, because during the installation process, I had to insist certain things happened because those were the instructions on how to make this thing perform at its best. Everything from the position of the float to the where the pump was placed, all these different things that were specified as important things. If I had left it let me give you a good example of why things would have been bad. They said they were all done. They got out. They said, "Hey, we're all finished." I said, "Well, show me. Let's see what it does." So we opened it back up, filled that thing up with water, and lo and behold, the pump didn't turn off until the pipe that dumps stuff into the cistern was already halfway under. Now, can you imagine the kind of blockage that could easily accumulate at the end of that pipe with the waste not ever actually going completely out of the pipe? No, thank you. So I said, "Hey, look, we need to adjust all this stuff." So we adjusted everything. They had to crawl back down in there. They had to move the float lower. They had to move the zip tie. They also had to reposition it because I noticed they had installed it where the float could have easily gotten tangled on some other stuff that was in there. So all of those things were those little catches are going to clearly prevent me from having to make a phone call in a short period of time because it's failed again. So let's talk about how much I saved. I thought we can throw out numbers. So as I mentioned, the original bid from the first plumber was $5,600, $5,700, right in that ballpark. And remember, that was going to theoretically address pipe-related things, but did not include a pump. Okay. Including that stupid $500 bill I let myself pay to that first company, and including the pump and including everything else, out of pocket, I paid about $4,600 for the work that happened. And I got myself a new pump. I got myself all the things the first plumber suggested for $5,600, but that didn't include a pump. So if I had gone with the other guy, he would have had to install a pump, which would have easily equaled probably, the pump was about $1,600. I'm sure he would have charged me between $500 and $1,000 to install that thing. So we're probably talking an additional, $2,500 to get that all squared away. So that would have been $7,500, $8,000 easy with that guy. And I ended up paying about half that. Money I didn't want to pay, money I had not budgeted for. In fact, that money had been budgeted to pay part of the tuition for my son's going off to Berkeley next month. Okay, so I had to pull money from elsewhere. But the point of this story, I apologize for how long it's going, is you should own this stuff. You need to, and particularly with critical systems. And the other part of this is, for those of you who've been listening for a while, one of the things I'd been considering doing with this home was renting it out. Now imagine that happening with me having renters in the house. If I had renters in the house, now number one, you can absolutely expect tenants to not be as aware of that setup. Even if I tell them, even if I give them a disclosure that says, "Hey, this is a thing that exists on the property," and rules would have to go with it, right? If the power goes out, you cannot take a shower, you can't do the dishes, you can't do any laundry, don't flush the toilets, because if the power's out, the pump won't come on, and if it overflows, that's a bad thing, right? And you can absolutely bet that a tenant is not going to do that. A tenant is going to continue to use everything. And maybe maybe it doesn't turn into a problem. The way I see it set up now, I don't think it would be a problem, but it would definitely, depending on how long it goes. And remember, we now live in a state of California where your power can be off for 2-3 days at a time, for not very good reasons, at least in most parts of the state. Right now, I get and we could get, that's a totally different discussion. But here in the middle of Morgan Hill, it makes no sense for the power to get turned off like that, but it does. If that had happened, I would have had to find lodgings for those folks for 13 days. I would have had to put them in a hotel. Probably would have costed me about $180 to $200 a night. There's a local, one of those, 2-bedroom with a kitchen places right here in town. And if they pushed, they might have even been able to insist on 2 rooms, because remember, they're renting a 5-bedroom home. That's what my home has, 5 bedrooms. And they would argue, well, you need to give us the accommodation that's comparable to what we're renting from you, which would be at least 4 bedrooms, right? So that would be bad. That would not be a pleasant expense to have to be considering. So what is the lesson that we learn? I think the lesson we learn is, as an investment, I think it is smart to avoid properties that have weird things that potentially cause larger problems. And this would be one of them. Now, a septic tank is fine. I've lived in homes with septic tanks. I don't see that as a problem. As a homeowner, I would simply, there's math that you can do to figure out how frequently you should pump out your septic tanks. I know when I was a kid and we had a septic tank, it was like every 6 years or something got pumped out. But in any event, pumping out a septic tank is different. I just paid to get this pumped out, and it cost me $500. So there's that, but it's not $5,000, right? So I mean, it's an expense, but it's something you can budget for. And also, you don't know when these things are going to go out. I was told that these things last 10 years, and I looked it up, and sure enough, they last from 5 to 15 years, depending on how well they're taken care of. But this went out in like 5 years. So, and I installed it 5 years ago. I know exactly how the house has been getting used, and I'm a little bit stymied as to how this thing failed at the earliest point that you would expect one of these things to go out. So anyway, particularly since when I moved in, we had 10 years of no problems before we had to worry about this pump. So absolutely a crapshoot. You can't even let's say you wanted to be the super attentive landlord, which I was. I mean, I put it onto my calendar, 10 years from this date, just replace it. Doesn't matter if I think I'm going to get 5 more years out of it, just replace it so that you're doing it on your schedule and not in a situation where you don't have a pump for some period of time. And you'll also, if you do it that way, if those of you who do have a property like this, if you do it before the pump fails, you can use the pump to pump the waste out of the cistern entirely before you replace it. So you don't have to pay for a sewage truck to come and pump it out and save yourself $400 or $500. Anyway, nice little tip, right? Little pro tip for I have a cistern with poo in it on the side of my house. So there's that. And I hope that's useful. I realize it's not international news. It's the RebelBroker standing in the rain watching guys pull a poop pump out of the hole at the side of his house. But hey, real world experience is the best. Something else I wanted to discuss today. I've been trying to figure out what are some things that really keep people from achieving their goals. And I think a lot of it is just this self-doubt. Maybe I'm too introspective. Maybe I'm really just projecting, right? Maybe I'm assuming all of you have the same hangups I do. And I've never argued I have this perfect investment mentality. This house is a perfect example of that. Now, lucky for me, the fates have protected me from some of the things I thought might happen over the last 2 years. And the house is now worth more today than when I would have tried to sell it 2 years ago. So great for me. But also at the same time, opportunities elsewhere in this city and neighboring cities where I might have bought, the prices have gone up as well. So, that might be a wash for me. But my plan would be to pull equity out of this house, take some of it to buy another home here locally, and then purchase properties in markets we've talked about here on the show, like Boise, Idaho, Phoenix, and the greater Phoenix area, some of the suburbs. There's a lot of different areas, I think, that are kind of sexy from an investment standpoint. But so much of it has to do with overcoming your issues that hold you back. But one of the other things is this inability for a lot of people to reach out and find people to cooperate on deals. Aside from confidence, I think that's probably one of the most detrimental things to folks who are trying to get investing. So what does it require? What do you need to sort of build in yourself so that that's not a problem for you? Well, first, it requires a great deal of personal honesty. And I don't mean honesty in how you deal with other people. I mean honesty in how you deal with yourself. You need to really understand what you're not good at, but understand it from the standpoint of a honest assessment rather than the simple lack of confidence, right? So much of real estate is really basic math when you're looking for an investment. In fact, investing is so much easier than buying a house for you to live in, right? There's so much of an emotional element. I mean, we just finished talking about this house, and the only thing that has kept me in this house, because I was done with, for those of you, I know I keep saying for those of you who are new versus been around for a while, I got divorced back in 2012. Not a great time for me. Absolutely, I'm one of those people who kind of believes it's a one-shot deal, right? And when you stick, you fix a relationship when you're in a marriage, right? That's been my thing. My wife at the time didn't apparently share that view, so we ended up getting divorced. But the thing I promised myself was that I was going to give my children stability in their home. So kept the house they grew up in. I've kept it all along and have wanted to provide them with that stability. Well, 2 of them are now off to college. The third one went to college and came back and is about to go off to college again. And there's a lot of soul searching. And I don't want to really get into these crazy weeds, but and I'm not sure the advice I hear is good advice. Because people don't, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. The advice I keep getting from people is when it comes to my personal decisions on what I am or am not going to do, be more selfish. And I have a real big problem with that. The absolute best move for me would have been to sell this house a couple of years ago. But I didn't. Because I really wanted, like as I said, to have that stability in my kids' lives, and I think I did the right thing, But again, and this is the stuff I have to deal with. I am a second guesser. It's amazing how when it comes to representing other people, I can see the lay of the land. I can tell them what's going to come over the horizon in the transaction. I can guide the process. I can make concise, quick, decisive moves for them on their behalf with them to achieve their goals. When it comes to my stuff, and this is I think what a lot of people who aspire to be investors have to conquer, who are the same way, right? You're great when it comes to helping someone else make a decision. When it's yourself, it's more difficult. And for me, what makes it more difficult is the emotional baggage that goes along with it, right? The how will it make me feel? How will it make my kids feel? And I realize this is a super stupid thing, but how will it affect my ex-wife? Because another promise I made to myself was that I would teach my children through my example how to be a grown-up when something in life happens that you don't want to happen, right? So I don't badmouth my ex-wife. I treat her with respect. I had Thanksgiving dinner with my ex-wife. I will be having Christmas dinner with my ex-wife with all the kids in attendance. So it's I know. It's weird, and it's a whole other thing. Maybe one day one of you is here in Morgan Hill. We can go out and have an adult beverage, and you can mock me as we enjoy each other's company. Anyway, so and here's the thing. I can't give you a magic bullet. There isn't one. For anyone who has seen the movie City Slickers, right? And the guy, the grizzled old cowboy guy, just talks about the one thing that you got to figure out, right? And everyone tries to get him to tell him what the one thing is, and the punchline is there is no one thing. The one thing is different for everybody. That's true in what you want out of life. That's true in what's going to truly make you happy in a lot of ways, and it's also true in what holds you back. But it's crazy because I think our brains try to protect ourselves from really being honest about what does that to us. I think there's a certain amount of personal emotional pain that comes with being honest about that. And it sucks, but you got to do it. The only way you can move forward is to identify that stuff. And then once you've identified it and you're totally personally honest with yourself and you realize the things you do and you don't know, don't ignore them. Don't delegate them entirely to someone else. Bring in a partner. Bring in someone who has that domain knowledge that you need to achieve that. For a lot of you, it may be a contractor, right? I know an awful lot of you who reach out to me are contractors or were contractors. And for you, the scary part's the financial side, the figuring out the negotiation side. So that person needs me, right? The person who is totally comfortable with the negotiation side maybe doesn't need someone like me as much, still needs me maybe for access to things, and that's cool too. But really needs someone on that contractor side, someone who understands how to work through a deal, to get work done, to get subcontractors. It's okay. That is an A-okay thing to acknowledge because at least once you've identified the shortcoming, you know you need to backfill it. Right? You need to fill in that position with someone who can pull it off or pull it off with you. And again, just like I did with my plumbers, don't delegate it all. Ask ask questions. Be willing to be the dumbest person in the room and ask those questions that even make you think, if I ask this, he's going to think I'm a moron. He's going to assume I'm an idiot if I ask this question. Fine. That person believing you're an idiot is not going to cost you a freaking dime. And in my case, it might just save you about $4,000. So ask away. You may end up being the quote unquote annoying customer of the day. Don't be a jerk about it. Just say, you know what? I just want to understand what's going on, right? I get it. We're standing at the bottom of a hill. There's a pipe that goes uphill. You know, if you change it from a 3-inch pipe to a 2-inch pipe, doesn't that change the math as it relates to the pump, since the pump says it's rated for 2 inches at 55 feet of head, right? So you're going to have that. And here's what you're going to discover. They don't know. If you want to see a deer in the headlights look from a plumber who's doing this, say, well, hold on a second. This pump says it's a 3-inch, it's set up for a 3-inch pump, but all of these ratings relating to head and pressure and all this stuff, that math changes if you make it 2 inches, right? Isn't that right? Because the volume of the water is 2 inches, is 1 inch different. So Google it and figure it out. The point is, you acknowledge the things that you may even be trying to ignore or avoid that are shortcomings in how you think about the world or think about yourself or think about what you're trying to do, and you work through them. Then the first step to working through them is to identifying them. You know, and I hope stuff like this is helpful. I know it's at least therapeutic for me. I am a guy who thinks too much, and I get that. I often suffer from paralysis of analysis. I want to crunch my numbers, get a super deep level of analysis going on. And sometimes I'll go, well, you know, if I just wait for this little thing to happen, and that's self-defeating as well. You want to do due diligence, and due diligence doesn't equal diligence that stops you from taking action. You know, I'd rather, at this point, I try to develop a mindset. I'd rather take action now that gets me 80% of where I wanted to go, rather than do nothing, which gets me 0% of where I wanted to go. And then just deal with the fallout, right? And I now find myself in a situation at the end of 2019 where I need to put more hustle on. I've had a lot of expenses that I wasn't expecting at the end of this year, to the tune of, God, between plumbing and electronics. What was the other thing that totally blew up? It was an appliance that went out. I think I'm in the hole by 15 or 20 grand this year in terms of random crap that I had to deal with. So I'm gonna figure out a way to overcome that. I'm not real sure yet how I'm gonna do it, but it's gonna happen because I need to make it happen. Maybe necessity is the mother of invention and gets us going. But I really want all of you to take this opportunity at the end of the year to analyze where you are, analyze where you were, how far have you come since you were, and where do you want to be? And you need to really quantify this stuff. If you can make yourself do it, write a list of goals and then create weekly things that you will do. You want to get it down to the smallest piece that contributes to the bigger goal, right? You want it to be a pyramid with the base is strong because every week you're doing something that feeds the rest of the building, right? I'm not Tony Robbins. I get it. I'm not pretty. I'm not tall. I'm not in shape. I am a middle-aged, overweight dude who ain't too pretty. But I bring some pretty sharp analytical skills, and when I get outside of my own head, when I'm not dealing with my own stuff, if I'm dealing with someone else's stuff, I'm awesome. I have an amazing track record of steering my folks in the right direction. I just need to figure out a way to clone myself so that then I can just have my other self give me a disconnected chunk of advice like I give to other people. But anyway. All right, folks, that's about it. I have a lot of things on my to-do list, and so many of them are focused on you guys on all kinds of different levels. I just picked myself up a brand new Sony A6600 camera with a couple of really awesome lenses. I want to use that to enhance the photos. I've been using a great Nikon forever, but it just was getting too old. So got myself that to do property photos and get super creative with that. I love taking the photos. I took a lot of photography classes in college, so I'm kind of getting back into it as both a professional thing for real estate, but also as a personal hobby thing. So hopefully that will feed more online stuff, more chances for us to interact, not just here in the podcast, but I'm also hoping to leverage that into some interesting YouTube stuff. And I've also got a couple of other things in the fire that I've been working on now for about 6 months, and can now actually get out of the planning phase and into the doing phase now that I've got the gear. I'm not going to talk about those though, because it seems like I jinx myself. I'll talk about them and then I'll have to put them on a back burner and I can't deliver them on the schedule I wanted to. So anyway, lots of interesting things to look forward to, I think, with any luck, unless I get struck by lightning, which, given the way this year's gone, is really a dramatic possibility. The goal is always to leave you guys with more knowledge on the table than time you've invested, and I certainly hope we've achieved that today. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you all next time.